This crime incident is about how a sweet old grandma commits a horrible crime due to weeks of bottled up feelings and grudges against her son-in-law. The day began normally and ended with a lot of rageful emotions. On February 11, 2014, Cynthia Cdebaca was getting ready to attend her granddaughter's spelling bee, but her son-in-law restricted her because of the clothing she was wearing, which triggered her and led her to the unthinkable act, for which she was sentenced. Cynthia Cdebaca, aged 65, will be spending the rest of her life behind bars, as she was found guilty of first-degree murder in February of Geoward Estaquio, who was married to her daughter. Cdebaca was found admitting to the murder in interrogation, which she clearly stated, "I went and shot him."
Tell me, he's gotta be dead. I think he's dead. I hope so.
You got your gun from your purse, and then what happened?
Went and shot him. Wasn't enough.
The 53-year-old man was found dead on the kitchen floor on her 63rd birthday, February 11th, 2014, around 8 a.m., after making crude remarks to her on the back patio of the family's lavish home in a gated Fallbrook neighborhood. Now let's get into the depth of it. When Cynthia Cdebaca sustained a stroke, her daughter, Laura Salinas, agreed to let her stay at a granny flat linked to the house she shared with her husband, Geoward Estaquio. This is where the incident initially got its start. In doing so, Laura would be able to help her mother recover and become healthy again. However, despite living in a huge, lavish home in Fallbrook, California, they were still very unhappy as a family, and a troubled family, mainly because of Geoward's behavior. Laura's husband, who was outwardly thought of as a pleasant and friendly man, was actually strict and aggressive as a parent who applied what he called tough love, inflicting verbal and physical abuse on his family, as well as breaking their toys when they misbehaved. One of the neighbors stated in the interview that he would be out there watering and he would see, "Oh, where I see smoke, I see fire, gotta put out the fire," and he would hose my aunt down with the hose, and he did it to my cousin too.
My Aunt Cindy would be on the back patio smoking because she wasn't allowed to smoke in the house. And he would be out there watering and he would see, "Oh, where I see smoke, I see fire. Gotta put out the fire," and he would hose my aunt down with the hose. He did it to my cousin too.
Cynthia was used to seeing Laura and her husband fight frequently. The urn containing Cynthia's late husband's ashes was also thrown out by him. Despite this, the family tolerated Geoward's behavior until one day when things took a terrible turn. Cynthia's hatred for her son-in-law grew, and she could see no other course of action than to murder Geoward. On the day of his death, she answered, "I did," to the cops when they asked if anybody tried to stop Geoward from abusing without hesitating. When Cynthia's fury reached its peak, she went to a nearby gun store and purchased a .38 caliber 5-shot revolver along with some ammo. All it took for her to want to kill Geoward was for him to make a statement or do something, and it didn't take long for that to happen. After about 2 weeks, Cynthia went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. On February 11th, 2014, she had intended to attend a spelling bee competition for her children. She was mocked by Geoward. "He told me after I had changed, 'You can't go out like that, you look ghetto,' he said," Cynthia informed the police.
You can't go like that because it looks like you're ghetto.
This filled her with rage. Cynthia then went to her granny flat to get the gun. A few minutes later, the sound of 5 gunshots, followed by 5 more, and 5 more could be heard echoing throughout the neighborhood. Geoward was carrying a laundry basket across the patio when Cynthia carefully loaded the revolver and began shooting at him. She made the decision to walk all the way to her car to reload 5 more rounds before returning to the backyard and finding the victim bleeding and fumbling to escape. He was able to get inside his house and locked the door, but Cynthia fired through the glass of the kitchen door with a reloaded gun to go inside the kitchen, and then she fired 5 more shots into the victim. But she was still not done. She made the decision to go back to her car to reload 5 more rounds before pulling out the revolver and firing 5 more shots once more until the victim was dead. The body was found with 12 bullet holes all over it from head to toe. This wasn't it. In the meantime, Cynthia left her dying son-in-law and walked into a nearby cafe where she casually ordered bacon and eggs. She went to a casino after finishing her meal and played slots for about 2 hours. She then went to get a coffee. She was taken into custody by the police there. Cynthia began acting strangely once she was in custody. Cynthia confesses in video evidence from her initial interview that she didn't bother to check on her son-in-law after she had fired all the shots. She said, "I didn't care."
You checked to see if he was dead?
I didn't care.
She admitted to the police and showed no remorse for her horrifying action, as she confidently said, "I'd do it again."
About it?
No.
Would you do it again?
Yes.
Cynthia raised her arms in the air and applauded when the officers informed her that Geoward had died. She laughed and said, "Oh, good, good, good." Then Cynthia admitted that she had been planning to kill Geoward for some time and had even visited a shooting range 3 weeks prior to the murder to practice hitting targets. She explained to the police how Geoward had abused her family in order to defend her actions.
You can't go like that because it looks like you're ghetto.
So mean to me, to all of them. Yes, he is, said Cynthia. They were afraid of him, yes. So mean to my daughter. I told her 13 years ago he's evil. Shortly after her interview, Cynthia was given the chance to say goodbye to her family before being led off to jail.
I wanted to.
While most of them hugged Cynthia, her youngest granddaughter pushed her away and said, "No, you killed my dad." While it was evident from the start of the trial that Cynthia had killed Geoward, the main issues it sought to address were whether the murder was planned and whether it was justified. The case against premeditation was fairly simple to disprove, given that Cynthia had only recently purchased the murder weapon and had even visited a shooting range to hone her shooting techniques. Although Cynthia claimed that she had wanted to get him for 13 years, it was more difficult to contest the notion that the murder was justified. Cynthia also claimed that Geoward was an abuser, both verbally and physically, to justify her crime.
Years I wanted to go get him.
But the defense included Geoward's wife, Laura, who tried to excuse his behavior by claiming that he had been acting out of passion or anger. Laura, Geoward's wife and Cynthia's daughter, gave a witness statement in Cynthia's favor in court. Her attorney testified in court that his client snapped after witnessing her son-in-law Geoward abuse her daughter and grandchildren for years. This is not a case where she did this out of greed or self-interest, he said. She did it, in her mind, to protect her family. He continued by requesting that the jury convict his client of voluntary manslaughter rather than murder, telling the jury that this case was sad for everyone involved and had no winners. But the lawyer's efforts were unsuccessful. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Cynthia Cdebaca, 65, guilty of first-degree murder. Cdebaca was sentenced to 50 years, to life in prison in March 2017, meaning she will probably serve the remainder of her life behind bars. Cdebaca was given the opportunity to speak in front of the court before being taken to jail. She sobbed, "I'm really, really sorry." Cynthia was unable to speak because she was overwhelmed with emotions. Following her mother's conviction, Laura also gave a moving speech. She said, "I just want to say that this is a tragedy. I love my mom, and I love Geoward. I'm hoping that after today we can move forward." She claimed that both her family and the family of her husband had suffered. Estaquio was one of 8 kids in a close-knit family who gathered for celebrations and laughter. 3 of his siblings, including 2 from the East Coast, were also present at the hearing. However, the right decision was made regarding the incident and justice was served. Cynthia couldn't escape the consequences of her horrifying actions as she expressed no remorse during interrogations too. The crime was then labeled to be premeditated rather than unplanned or an act of defense.